The following podcast may be explicit. One Joe Young presents Adventures from the Shed, a tabletop RPG podcast. You can find us online at adventuresfromtheshed.com. Welcome to a special series of episodes in which Kurt and Joe play Cthulhu Confidential from Pellgrane Press. This is a two-person system based on the GUMSHOE One-2-One game system. Let's hear about the game and meet the people. Enjoy the podcast. Hi, and welcome to the Shed for Adventures from the Shed. You can find us online at adventuresfromtheshed.com, on iTunes, Facebook, Google+, Bing. Actually, we're on YouTube for a few episodes, too. But for today, we have a very special episode. And by we, I mean me, Joe, and him,
Kurt.
And Joe and Kurt, we are going to be playing the Cthulhu Confidential One-to-One system. Kurt's going to be running it, and we're going to talk a bit about the system before we get started. So you already know I'm Joe, and that's Kurt. He's going to run it. I'm going to be the player, and we're going to talk a bit about it now. Kurt's going to kick us off. Go ahead,
Yeah, I'll kick it off. I'm really excited. I've never played a one-on-one role-playing game before, and it is not one versus one. This is meant to be a collaborative storytelling experience between a game master and one player. With JJ, you may or may not recall that we did a three-person D&D adventure, which was pretty cool, but I think this has the potential to be even more intimate. So what we're going to do, you may have heard our episodes where, as a group, the Shed crew played Trail of Cthulhu, which is a really well-designed game created by Pellgrane Press, or published by Pellgrane Press, using the GUMSHOE system. And the GUMSHOE system, in case you don't know, is really an investigative game system. It provides for fighting and combat, but really it's designed about exploring mysteries and investigating crimes and problems. Trail of Cthulhu, we had an exciting adventure. This is in the same universe and the same mythos, but entirely different characters and different stories.
One of the things I like about the GUMSHOE system, by the way, one of my favorite things, I should say, is the idea that you can never miss an important clue. It's all about you get the clues, and it's up to you to interpret them. And I really like that part about the system, and it carries forward into Confidential as well.
Exactly. So, in case you're wondering, this Cthulhu Confidential game is available for pre-order through the Pellgrane Press website. The print version is expected probably next month, which would be May of 2007, but I will say it's been delayed a number of 2017, excuse me.
We just traveled far back in time.
But it has been delayed a number of times. If you pre-order it, however, you immediately get access to the PDF of the entire game. It's not perhaps totally final, but I will tell you it's several hundred pages, and it is superb. So if you are interested in this, hop on the website. I think the retail price is about $44. After tax, I think I paid $52 for access to the full game. What that gets you is the rule set, a description of the system, and then 3 adventures. And these adventures are all set in what we would call the film noir style. So this is your classic detective tale. You might think of Humphrey Bogart in The Big Sleep, or The Maltese Falcon, or Dashiell Hammett's novels.
It was a dark and stormy night.
Exactly. So there are 3 adventures included in the game with 3 different detective protagonists. Tonight we are going to be playing The Fathomless Sleep, and Joe will be playing kind of what I would call a classic private investigator from the 1930s by the name of
Dex Raymond, hard-boiled private eye.
Exactly. And by way of background, I'll just tell you, Dex Raymond, he is very much a tabula rasa. He is a blank slate, classic PI, so Joe is really going to be able to give him his own personality and play him the way he wants to play him. The other 2 adventures, and by the way, our adventure will take place in 1930s Los Angeles, which is a really exciting place on the cusp of radical change. The other 2 adventures we're not going to play or talk about, but one of them takes place with a female private investigator in New York, and the other takes place with a male African-American private investigator in Washington, D.C. So those ones have some interesting social dynamics based on kind of the sexism and racism that those private eyes might encounter, and are really interesting adventures in their own right.
Not to be too nitpicky, but I thought it was a female news reporter.
You're right. She's a journalist. You're totally right.
Viv.
Exactly.
I just thought that was an interesting idea that the in that time period, the female's going to stick her nose in everybody else's business, and that would involve some friction and conflict.
That's exactly right. So the other two adventures have some conflict inherently built into them. This one, Joe is really going to get to kind of create his character to play as he wants to. If it's cool with you, let's talk a little bit about the rules.
Sure, I've already got the horrible voice for the guy. It's almost like your potted plant, unfortunately.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. So what I'd like to do, let's talk through the rules, one, so that we understand them, and two, so that the people at home know where we're going. And the first part of this episode will be just us getting to know the system a little bit, and then we'll jump into the adventure.
We'll be explaining a lot about what you're going to hear, so hopefully it makes a lot of sense when we get there, because I think the mechanics here are very different from even Trail of Cthulhu, where there were dice rolling for almost everything, or point spends, or something that, although different from our regular games, at least stuck for that full episode, or that full series of episodes. And here, we're onto a similar but very different mechanical system that we're going to learn as we go, as well as hopefully make sense of to the people listening.
Exactly. So let's give a summary of the rules, and then you'll see how these play out. And this is, I would say, the rules are interesting, and generally there's not many of them. In fact, I would say that they can be summarized on one page, and as they tell you in the book, basically they say, look, here's the rules, the rest is detail. If you don't remember anything else, that's fine. Yeah. There's some special rules for combat and mental distress, but if you don't know them, this one page will get you where you need to go. And this all revolves around the idea that, look, if you're a detective, not finding clues and not finding information is not fun.
It certainly does not propel the story forward. It makes it stagnate.
That's right. So failing to get key information is never interesting. Therefore, the rules are designed to help a Joe or Dex get the information he needs. But we're not just going to give it to him either, because that's no fun. So a lot of the mystery solving really lies in sorting the important from kind of the tangential or from the inconsequential red herrings that he will likely encounter.
Oh, yeah.
So let's start with talking about pushes.
Okay.
Pushes are designed to help you make an extra effort in an investigative circumstance to get more information. And you're going to start the game with 4 pushes. You can spend them whenever you want, and you may have the opportunity to earn additional pushes during play. But they're not going to be readily available. So you should kind of think, I'm going to get 4 pushes and maybe a couple of more.
I should expect to have only 4 for the whole session, and might pick up 1 or 2 more based on, I think it's very good dice rolls or an edge that might give me an extra push or something, and things that we'll talk about.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. You've got a bunch of abilities. You have a 1-page character sheet, and this comes as a pre-gen character in the book.
And I am psyched to be specific again and say it's barely a half-page character sheet.
Right.
It's very nice.
Half-page character sheet. And I'll let you talk about it a little bit, but
Sure.
The key here is that there are a number of general abilities, and you have either 1 die, or 2 dice in those abilities. And what that means is if I ask you to roll a check or a challenge that requires that skill, you're either going to roll 1 or 2 dice. And then what's fascinating about this is I'm not going to roll a die for the next 3 to 6 hours. The game master never rolls.
I love that part. I really like that part, yeah.
And you're going to know what the challenge is in advance. And there's 3 levels. There's going to be a number that I tell you is what's called the advance, and that's basically like your super success. So if you get that, it's going to be a great result, and you may even get an additional bonus called an edge from it. Then there's going to be what they call the hold, which is kind of like, in the middle. It's partial success, partial complication, perhaps, and usually there's no penalty associated with it, and there's no bonus associated with it.
It's kind of the wash. It happened, and nothing great or bad came out of it.
Correct. And then finally, the low end is what I think we call the setback. And what that means is you failed at what you were trying to do, and something bad happened to you. And because we don't have other party members who can come to your aid, if you fail, something bad is going to happen to you. And this game comes with neat cards, problem cards and edge cards. And if you fail, I will likely give you a very specific problem card that was tied to what happened there. Mm-hmm. So this is not a generic, hey, I got a problem. This is my character now has a role-playing based problem as a result of what just happened in the story. And if we get all the way to the end of our scenario and you still have open problems, that will affect the outcome of the scenario.
Right. That makes sense. So let me talk about what I have for my character sheet a bit. For anybody who is in possession of the PDF file. If you have purchased that book ahead of time and you've got access to it, you will see on page 66 is Dexter Dex Raymond. And I'll just read some of what's right on the sheet quickly to go through it. To give you an idea, investigative abilities. These are the abilities that the character can just do, meaning if this situation comes up and they employ these abilities, they get the result, provided it's part of the scene or the little encounter that we're on. So under investigative abilities for Dex is accounting, assess honesty, bargain, cop talk, cryptography, evidence collection, intimidation, inspiration, law, locksmith, photography, reassurance, research, and streetwise. And those are split up between personal, you can help me with some of these, Kurt, if you happen to remember, but there are personal relationships, there is investigative, well, not investigative, but the icon that's right after it. I don't know if you happen to remember what that is offhand. But I'll mention also the general abilities, and these are ones that everybody has. Athletics, cool, conceal, devices, driving, filch, fighting, preparedness, sense trouble, shadowing, stability, and stealth. What'd you see, Kurt?
And just so you know, the symbols, there's one with two people, that's interpersonal. The one with the gear is a technical skill. The book is an academic skill.
Academic, okay.
And none of that really matters other than as a signal to you of, hey, this is how I should be role-playing this.
Exactly the idea. And then the other part here is starting pushes for Dex. Actually says 3 on here, although I don't know if the scenario might say 4. But it says specifically on the sheet. And then the only other part of this sheet is a little story, and it talks about how he is, as Kurt put it, he's a blank slate, but an archetypical private investigator of the time.
Right.
And I'm picturing him just as they put him on the back of that page, so page 67. He's just a guy with his fedora pulled over his face, so there's shadow over his eyes, and he's got a cigarette in the corner of his mouth, and he's wearing some sort of trench coat and a black tie and a white shirt. That's
right.
Dex.
Right. Now, here's a key rule that I need you to remember, because I'm going to be having a lot of stuff to think about. If we talked about pushes, and they're actually really important, if you get to the advance, which is the super success number, with fewer dice than you could have rolled, that's when you can get an additional push.
Okay.
So, like, let's say the advance number is 5, and you roll a 5 or a 6 on your first die when you had 2 dice, then you get the advance, and because you got it in 1 die, you get a push.
Okay.
So if you can try to remind me, hey, I got that only in 1 or 1 die, then I'll remember, oh, okay, you get a push. And you're going to have to keep track of your pushes and tell me when you spend them and when you don't, and how many you have left.
Now, as part of preparing for this adventure, I only read, from the player's perspective, the first part of the rule book. I read up to, I want to say I read up to page 30-ish. There's a little bit more than that. And then there are some that afterwards goes into the scenarios, which Kurt shared with me, which one we would be playing so that I could read a little bit about the character there. But to that point, what that means for me at least is as a player, this is short setup. Before we started, though, Kurt mentioned how as a GM for the game, as the game master, there are actually a bunch of things that they can do. And you've heard a couple of them so far. And just based on what I've read so far, I want to explain one of them. And the idea that you are going into do they call it a scenario? Each piece of the entire adventure has its own scene. And when you go into a scene, as a GM, you're creating that scene with different levels of success. So the advance, the middle, which I still can't remember, the hold, and then there's the setback. So if you're creating this scene, you're creating under advance, what kind of edges could somebody get? And an edge is an actual piece of paper or card or a note that they will get that gives some mechanical or role play benefit to their character.
Right.
And then under the hold piece, they don't necessarily get anything. They just got what they needed out of the scene to get out of the scene. And then under the setback, they're going to get a different piece of paper called a problem. And that is either a role-playing or mechanical detriment to the character, which needs to be taken into account or worked off by spending time or some way to get rid of this problem or role-play with it, because it could be a lot of fun, depending on what it is.
Right.
So that preparation, meaning you've got a plot, you've got different arcs off of this plot, and you've got all these pieces where you are going to have to write out each scene, if you're creating it yourself, and how they link together. And if it sits alone, what is the outcome of it? So I can see as a GM, there would be a lot of preparation here. To Kurt's point, there are 3 adventures that come with the book. So great way to get started, and probably some really good, almost templates to work from.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. If you are going to GM this, they are very explicit that from the game master perspective or the game moderator perspective, this is more about preparation than improvisation. You definitely have to improv conversations and come up with filling in the facts, but you've got to know how the pieces of the story fit together and be prepared to go where the player goes. It is, you can go different ways to get to the end, but it's not a totally open sandbox. So part of my job is to make sure you're getting clues that lead you to where you need to go so that we don't end off, with you deciding you want to fly off to Florida to go interview someone that's totally irrelevant. With the GUMSHOE system and with this, Joe, when Dex looks for information in the right place, he is going to get the clue. As simple as that. But in order for you to obtain clues, you've got to describe your character interacting with the contents of the scene.
I use one of the examples that I remember from the book. It tells you that if you're in the room and there's something taped under the desk, and you specifically say, I'm going to look under the desk, you get the thing that's taped under the desk. You don't have to say, I'm going to look under and roll a die to see if your perception's high enough to find the thing under the desk. You get it because you actually led your character to the point where that thing was.
Correct. But if you just say, I walked into the room and I look around, what do I see? You will not see the clue under the desk, at least not immediately.
But if it's what Trail of Cthulhu called a core clue, then you'll get it before you leave the scene.
Exactly.
The GM will push it upon your character's knowledge, even if it's not upon the player's knowledge.
Right. So we talked about pushes. I'm generally not going to urge you to use a push. You should use them as appropriate. There are a couple of places in the episode where I might say, do you want to use a push here? But you should not wait on that. Now, without using a push, there's another great way for you to get additional information, and that's to use your sources. So Dex Raymond is a seasoned private eye in LA, and he has a network of people who he has relied on and who have helped him over the last few years. And we're not going to go into detail about who those people are now, but the idea here is that, Joe and Dex do not have a party, and he does not have every skill that he's going to need. For example, he does not know anything about the occult. He does not know, there are skills that he doesn't have. So he has a network of sources. He's got, and you'll learn this, but he's got a high-up buddy in the police department that he can go to for help. He's got a low-end, guy in the police department. He's got a kind of a occultist, fortune reader friend and a forensic doctor friend and all of this stuff. So they may or may not come out in the adventures, but you can drive scene to scene to scene to scene. But at any time, you can basically say, "Look, Dex would go off here and talk to my professor friend to learn more about this particular thing."
I was thinking of it in some of the common lingo of like calling it a lifeline. Essentially, I don't know the answer, but I know someone who does.
Correct.
So I go to that person and I ask them, how can you help me with this?
Right. And what I would urge is, those are kind of relaxed breaks between the major scenes, but they still should be role played. Like if you just say, I want to go to see my professor and tell him what he can tell me about this, that's not much fun for us. So we still want to play that out as part of the adventure. So there's a bunch of description in here of all the different skills that, to be honest, we're just going to skip, and we're going to use our common sense about what does what. And the book does a great job of preparing us for that. I will also mention that you can try to do something even if you don't have a general ability in it, but you got to justify to me why it feels plausible in the particular circumstance. And if you don't have it as a skill, you're going to have to take an extra problem card and roll the one die that it gives to you.
And one of the things I noticed later on in the book, I think when it talks about continuing after an adventure, provided, of course, you live through it, is between adventures, you can actually acquire or advance a skill. And what Kurt just described of trying something you've never tried before is one way to justify that between adventures, of picking up a new skill, especially if you want your character to have that. So if I wanted Dex to come up with forensics after this adventure, I would push him during the adventure to use it so that it makes sense in between.
Right. Now, I will mention also, Joe, let's say you roll and you come up a little short of the number you want to hit.
That is sure to happen.
And remember, the number. So you might want to get an advance, or maybe you're in the setback level and you're like, man, I got to get to at least the hold. You can roll an extra die by either spending an edge card that allows you to do that, or taking on an extra problem. And more likely, it's going to be the extra problem.
Yep.
And so in a particular circumstance, you may say, I really want to get this up, give me the extra problem. Yep. And you got to remember that that's an option. And I would not discourage you from doing that because those extra problems make for interesting role play.
Right. I'm expecting Dex to have 3 broken hands just because I'll keep pushing everything.
Now, you can only get one extra problem per test. Okay. So you only get one extra roll. You can get one from an edge and another from an extra problem. I don't see that happening, but you could, in theory, do it. Yep. And finally, you can choose to even not, engage in a test. You can just accept the consequences of a setback because you think it might be interesting for the story.
Yeah, I like that option too. It spells it right out in the rules. You don't have to house rule something like that, but the player can say, you know what, I want to fail this because I think it'll be neat if I'm on the bad guy's bad side as we progress in the story, rather than getting away with something. It might actually make the story more along the way the player wants the character to be. So it's nice. Accept that and just move on. It's cool.
Right. So when you have a problem, if it's unaddressed at the end of the story, it can lead to more of a downbeat ending. You can get rid of it during gameplay by doing something realistic to get rid of it. And you can describe what that is to me. And it might include taking time away from the main adventure. And all that is just you tell me, like, what would Dex do? And depending on how you play him, maybe he goes to a bar and drinks his problem away with bourbon. Maybe he goes to the gym and pounds a punching bag. Yep. Maybe he goes and has sex with a hot dame, a little roll of the hay. Yep. And depending on how convincing your description is, you might be able to remove that problem.
But then if there's a ticking clock going on, it's hazardous to spend time. So we want to be careful of that.
That's exactly right. Yep. I think we're getting near the end of what we need to cover in the rules. The total introduction for the player in this PDF is about 30, maybe 33 pages, of which 2 or 3 pages are truly critical.
Plus, there are about 10 pages or so that give you the full descriptions of your abilities. Mm-hmm. And if you can take them on face value, or once you get used to them, that's another 10 pages that it just explains how abbreviated these rules are. Within 15 or so pages is everything the player needs to know to play this game.
Right. I mean, to be honest, I prepped for this pretty hard, and I just flew over those skills because I was like, I know what these are going to do.
Yeah, we know what investigation of intimidation or law or locksmith. We know what those means and what they mean in the context of role play, and we're ready to go with it. We don't need to read out 5 sentences of what locksmith is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then, for those of you who want to game master the session, there's probably 50 or 60 pages of kind of advice on GMing, and none of it's really required for this. For the pre-gen episodes or the pre-made episodes. A lot of it is for, hey, if I wanted to create a one-on-one Cthulhu Confidential adventure, how would I go about doing that?
And Kurt, let me interrupt you for a moment, because there was something that I read as I was looking at this the other night that for the life of me, I can't find right now, and I've been thumbing through some pages. So first off, we know that we have a player. And then in this game, the GM is actually called the game moderator.
Correct.
But they don't use our old standby of NPCs, non-player characters. It is like GMCs?
Yeah,
it's a game moderator character.
I think that's exactly right.
Okay. Yeah. And I couldn't find that somewhere. But just as a note, they decided to change some of the nomenclature of our role-play gaming for us. At least they kept RPGs, and they kept player. And at least GM is a familiar abbreviation, although it is now game moderator.
Exactly. So do we want to give a little background on Dex before the adventure and his sources, or do we just want to jump into it?
I want to do a little bit. Well, actually, let me ask you, Kurt. As the GM, is Dex starting in his office? Because you mentioned something about an office.
Right, he's going to. So I tell you what, let me do a very brief background on where we stand, because this is 1937. So for those of you who are at home, we are coming out of the Great Depression. And you may or may not know, but Los Angeles, was basically a cow town prior to the Depression. It was a lot of farmland and orchards, and it was nothing like what you think of today. You really have Hollywood starting to take off in the 1930s. By way of reference, 1939 is the year that The Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind come out. So 1939 is a huge year in Hollywood. So prior, where we are at 37, you've got some businessmen who have been in most cases, real estate moguls who have basically been taking this cow town and turning it into a modern city. And then at the same time, you have this class of Hollywood stars and starlets coming up almost out of nowhere who are viewed as kind of the nouveau riche. The businessmen look down on them and don't respect them, but to the country at large and the community at large, they're larger-than-life icons. And in this world of fast and rapid growth and change, you've got an underworld, a criminal society, an underbelly that really is running a lot of what's happening in the town, and that has tentacles out into the world of the police. So the LAPD, certainly not everyone, but a lot of them are corrupt and are on the payroll of kind of some of these crime lords. And this is the world in which Dex Raymond is operating. And I'll let Joe tell you a little bit more about him, but he is an outsider by choice. He's smart. He's gritty. He could have been part of this corrupt establishment. He could have been a police officer on the take. But instead, something inside of him, he really wants to operate on the fringes, and he wants to set himself apart from that world, and he always had. He may remind you of Sam Spade or Philip Marlowe from the movies we know. But here, he's a character that Joe is going to kind of be able to create in his own image. And we're going to begin the first scene without a real predetermined biography.
He looks just like me.
Yeah, but he's outside the support of a real community other than the sources that we talked about. And I don't want to get into those now. I think what would make sense would be to have you pick your first problem, because what you need to do, and this is for role-play purposes only, you need to pick one of 4 problems. And I'm going to read them to you because they're interesting. And this is going to help you determine the nature of your character. So problem 1, what killed the cat? Even when you shouldn't look, or you have
Just as a point, what killed the cat is actually the title of it.
Title of the problem.
No cat actually died in the making of this game.
Every edge and every problem has a title. So Joe is correct. No cat was killed here. But here's the trait. Even when you shouldn't look, or you have no reason to want to know something, you can't not look. You can't stop probing. You worry problems like a terrier worries a rat. So you could pick that.
So the point of what killed the cat was curiosity. It's a curiosity problem.
Exactly. Yes. Number 2, lonely.
Aww.
You should have gotten over her by now. She's gone, and gone for good. It's time you moved on, found someone new. Maybe someone who won't play you for a sap this time. Oh, hell. Who are you kidding?
No, it'll be somebody else.
Yeah. Number 3, broke.
Oh, man.
Nobody could ever accuse you of loving money. You wouldn't be an honest private eye if that were the case. But a man needs to eat and keep the lights on. And you're on the verge of being evicted from both your apartment and your office.
Okay.
Or lastly,
what's this one?
Vice Hound.
Ooh.
Gambling, whores, the opium pipe. Wow. You've kicked all those vices before. So if you slip,
and I'll do it again.
So if you slip a little bit and indulge one or more of your compulsions, you can straighten yourself up again, right? Right?
I like broke because of the way I've described his office. I didn't even think about an apartment, but I've already, you can picture the apartment. So I'm going to go with broke.
All right. Well, I'll tell you, you're going to be in a dingy office either way. So if you wanted something else.
Well, I've already written a dingy office. Okay. I hope that's all right.
Awesome. All right. So you're going to go with broke.
Broke.
So what I would tell you is I will give you that problem.
Okay. I'll just set it on my table
No
here.
Mechanical advantage or disadvantage.
Okay.
But you need to, the need for money or survival or subsistence should in some way affect at least some decisions your character makes during the adventure.
Okay.
And I'm not going to push it. You just need to bring that in if you want to.
All right.
All right. So,
just as another behind-the-scenes note for those listening, it is just Kurt and I in the shed tonight, and we've kind of got this, well, I should say I made this haphazard setup. We do not have our big table. For those who have seen us on video or any pictures, we normally have a big table with the Our Adventures from the Shed logo on it, old time thanks to Mike Robertson, and we sit at that table and play. Today, Kurt and I are just kind of separated by a bench where he has all his stuff laid out, and we've got 2 TV trays and a couple little end tables, and we're kind of sitting face to face in what I thought would be a good atmosphere for the one-on-one game here. Now, back to what we were saying. So for Dex, I think broke fits the way that I've seen him so far. Dex, you can already picture he is that guy. He is that private eye, the one who, although he's dressed well, the cuffs of his shirt are slightly frayed, but it's nice and clean because that's the shirt that he wears to work. His tie is always tucked in unless he's just been in a tussle, and then it's hanging out and slightly loose. He's got that fedora on, pulled down over his eyes, and he doesn't smoke often. It's only for effect, but he does smoke because it has a good effect when it's needed. Always has the 5 o'clock shadow, even immediately after shaving. It just pops right back. And he's just a straight-laced guy. Kurt mentioned the point of that there's a lot of corruption as far as Dex is concerned. There are only... there might be more than one cop who isn't on the take, but he only knows and trusts one. And I'm presuming he's going to come up more than once, and that's Detective Sergeant Ted Gargan. He's going to be... I picture he's going to be somebody that Dex is going to talk to and get to know more as the story goes on. Mm-hmm. As far as what got him into it, he always felt out of place and wanted justice. The system just messed with everything in his life, and he just grew up and found one way he could fight the system without having to be part of it. So he went into the private dick business, and as a private eye, he has been able to make some impact on the world of corruption, although he knows its immense weight will not be alleviated by his own efforts. He'll just keep fighting while he can. And that's Dex to start. So whatever you've already pictured as the 1930s private eye, you're right, because that's who he is. I want to make it easy for those who want to put a picture in their mind.
Excellent. Listen, before we get started, I just want to give credit to the people who created this particular game. Some of you may know Robin D. Laws. He's a famed game master, wrote one of the classic texts on game mastering. So Robin Laws was directly involved in producing this or writing this adventure along with Chris Spivey and Ruth Tillman. And I think they've done a great job. So
yes, and I would like to give credit to the people who did the layout for the book insofar as at the top right of every page, their names are there, which I really like that. It isn't very often the authors get credit on every layout. As every page you turn, you get the recognition of the people who actually put this together. I appreciate that.
Right.
It's cool.
And lastly, I will just say this is the first time I played one-on-one and only the second time I played Gumshoe. And so if I screw up some of the rules or if we miss offering pushes or taking edges or things like that, we're going to do our best. But really what we're trying to do is tell a story together. And please don't slaughter us on Twitter.
The best part is, just like Trail of Cthulhu, neither of us will know that the other one screwed up.
That's exactly
and we'll
right.
just keep going.
That's exactly right. And as a last note, for those of you who don't know, you're like, well, this sounds like a lot of private eye investigative work. What the heck's up with Cthulhu? We're not going to talk too much about it, but the general idea is if you've read the horror of H.P. Lovecraft, you know that the Cthulhu mythos, basically, I'm super simplifying, but it's the idea that the world is a complete whole of blackness and nihilistic nothingness, and that there are these great deep ones, these ancient aliens who live under the sea and under the polar ice caps who are trying to work their way back to the world and essentially devour all of humanity, and that it's hopeless to ultimately stand against them. And Cthulhu is one of the kind of deities, if you will, but there are others, and they're these old ones or these deep ones, and it is a very kind of fear-based, horror-based, indescribable pathos in his horror, and the idea here is that perhaps a little bit of that might shine through into our detective story, depending on how things go.
And we think we're going to be able to pull some more of that off in the two-person narrative that we're going to have. For the audio perspective, I know many people are used to us filling gaps as much as possible with side conversations and making sure you're constantly entertained. I think in this series of episodes, you may notice some pauses for dramatic effect. Don't worry, your radio or your podcast machine isn't broken. It's just us maybe trying to make it a little more intense as we're playing.
And there is a lot of stuff that I'm going to be reading and tracking, not reading aloud, but reading to myself as we play. So Joe may be filling some airtime, describing what Dex is doing and looking around. And I think that's awesome. That's part of the game. I'm also going to urge him as a player to write down kind of everyone that gets mentioned and any connections that he can create between the characters, because this is a labyrinthine web potentially that we will weave during the course of this adventure.
I like the labyrinthian web.
I'm happy to chat more, but I'm also happy to jump in whenever you want to start. And I guess what I would say is, we're looking at probably 20 or 30 minutes to the end of this episode. So we'll get maybe the first scene or two done, and then we'll take a break and come back and play another hour or two, depending on how we're feeling, and go from there.
Sounds
the adventure
good.
could take between 2 hours at the low end and 9 hours at the epically crazy. Joe ran down every single clue that exists in the adventure. It's probably, 3 or 4 hours.
I was telling Kurt before we started that I'm almost tempted to go the completionist route. If Dex doesn't happen to die or go mad, it would be actually neat to explore every single possibility of an adventure. I don't know that I have ever done that, and considering we might be able to do that in just a few episodes, it might be worthwhile to try.
We'll see. We'll see if you find the clues.
Yeah,
some of them are not obvious. They make sure you get the big clues, but they don't make sure that you go off to check the guest house at the maid's place or whatever.
The French maid's place.
With a choker.
Yes.
All right. My son asked me about that. What are those French maid, Daddy? I was playing in the car.
Little side humor for those who pay attention to our other episodes.
I am going to set the first scene in the fathomless sleep.
Now, do we start in Dex's office? I want to know, because I have a description of his office, and I don't know. I could actually give it to you, and you could read it.
Well, I will give you the 2-sentence description, and then you can fill it out from there.
All right, go for it.
The first scene.
Oh, you have it highlighted and everything.
Oh, man, I highlighted the heck.
Sweet. All right, go for it.
So the action begins in the dingy Bunker Hill office of Dex Raymond's one-man private detective agency. You look around, and what I see is a window with a crack taped with masking tape, a cheap couch along the wall that looks like it was picked up off of the street, an old desk that's scratched, varnish is worn off, and a cheap chair behind it. And beyond that, I'll let you describe what the office looks like. And I'll ask you to tell me at least one thing in there that is particularly important, unique, or of sentimental value to Dex.
All right. So I wrote it as very close without a cracked window, but we'll go with the cracked window too. So does it matter the building it's in?
Not at all.
I just want to make sure that it doesn't affect the story. So his office is a hole-in-the-wall single room on the 3rd floor of a 5-story office building. He has one dingy window which is cracked and has tape over it and has faltering blinds in front of it. And there are slight lamps in opposite corners that struggle against the weight of the city's oppression and corruption with twin globes of faint light. At the edge of the light, on the far right corner of Dex's old worn desk, is an ancient cracked vase given to him by his grandfather on his mother's side. Although it's broken, light plays off the flecks of what could be precious gems in it, and those gems are set in the delicate Far Eastern artwork on it. It's about the only thing that shines in his office, and Dex is regularly distracted by it, picking it up to find yet another nuance in its decoration. So when he's got nothing else to do, Dex is sitting at his desk, and every now and then a little bit of that light that creeps far enough out of the corner will play off of this vase, and he checks it out.
Interesting. I imagine there's also a ceiling fan spinning that rarely stops.
I want to say in this office, there's the old metal fan with one blade that occasionally will scrape against the frame. So
nice,
it's that one with maybe one little thread or something on the front that wavers every now and then in the breeze.
So while Dex has been, I would say, a successful private investigator and has a reputation that will precede him, a good reputation, times have been tough, and there hasn't been a lot of work.
Yeah, he's currently broke, as I have found out recently.
Exactly. So he is pleased while he's sitting at his desk when he hears a knock at the door. It's just before 5, and he'd been planning to go home for the day, but he hears a kind of a polite but firm knock at the door.
So he looks up at the mostly opaque glass. There's a little bit of translucency to it, to the really faded eye that's been painted on it for the private EYE eye part. And he knows right on the other side of it that it says above it, Raymond P.I. And that's what the other person's looking at while they're knocking at the door. and I've already come up with the horrible detective voice or private eye voice for him. So I will use that in the first person for Dex. Hey, who is it? Come on in.
So the door opens somewhat timidly, but then more aggressively.
Mm-hmm.
And
actually, the faster it opens, the louder it squeaks.
So, well, it starts kind of quietly, and you see a really stunningly beautiful face peer around the corner of the door. And once she looks inside and sees that you're there, she opens it actually quite confidently and aggressively. And you see a woman, a dame, who is not the kind that you see every day. She's beautiful, raven black hair, wearing not a cocktail dress, but a very nice high-class dress that hugs her body in all the right ways.
Dex will immediately stand up and straighten out his shirt and brush the dust off of his leg that came off of his chair.
Excellent. She looks, in addition to being beautiful, she looks cool and sultry and everything that you did not expect to walk into your office today.
She looks like she's got money.
And she says, she does look like she has money. Yes. That's exactly right. And she says, Mr. Raymond?
Yeah, Dollface. Dex. Dex is fine.
Dollface. Dex it is.
Yes.
Mr. Raymond, I mean Dex. I need help. And I've asked around, and people have told me that you're the man who can help. Something terrible has happened to my sister, and I don't know what to do. And I may have waited too long. It may be too late. But I'm hoping you can help me.
Well, sit yourself down on the couch here and give me a little bit more information. Grab his chair, pull it around the desk over to the couch, and offer her the cleanest spot on the old worn couch, which is actually off to the right-hand side.
All right, so she kind of looks around the office, and she doesn't look with disdain, but she's looking around and is obviously not particularly impressed with the office, but she appreciates the effort that you're putting forth. And she sits down, and she crosses her legs, not intentionally trying to be sexy, but she just is. She's just a beautiful, confident woman. And
now, does Dex recognize her from anywhere?
He does not recognize her at all. So
tell me about your sister. Who is she?
He says, well, would you mind lighting my cigarette first? Do you have a light?
Oh, not at all. He keeps one in his desk, not on him. When he's in his office, it's in his desk. So he goes back around to the desk, pulls open the drawer, which sticks, of course, and he has to jimmy it a bit and clunk, 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 opens the door.
And while he's doing that, this lady has taken a beautiful silver cigarette case out of her small clutch and is very properly taking the cigarette and is holding it up to her lips, waiting for Mr. Raymond to light it.
Once he finally gets the lighter ready, flips open the top and strikes the flint, and off a little light goes for her.
All right, and I need you to roll a cool check.
I'm wicked cool.
So you should look at your sheet to see how many dice you have in cool, 1 or 2.
24 of them.
And I have one. You have 1. I'll tell you that the advanced number here is a 4 or greater, and the setback is 1 or less.
Okay, I know I can roll a 1. Here's my roll. Oh, it went all the way to the floor. What was it?
Do you want to take it? It's a 3.
I'll go with the 3.
Let's take it.
I'm going to take what I got.
All right, so that's going to be a hold, which is the middle result. And what you're doing here is you're rolling to see how taken you are in by this lady, and you can't deny that.
Definitely taken in by what appears to be money at this point.
Right.
Yes.
You can't deny that she's got something special about her, but you're not about to go all goo-goo-eyed at the first sight of her. So,
I'm more embarrassed that my drawer wouldn't open.
Excellent. Well, so at this point, she takes a small puff on her cigarette, and she says, well, may I tell you a little bit about my situation? By the way, I'm Margaret Deacon.
I'm Margaret. Dex.
Excellent. So, my sister, Helen.
Yep. And actually, just as Joe is doing at this point, Dex will pick up his little black book, flip open the top of it, and pick up a pencil, because he doesn't write in pen. I don't know why, but he doesn't. We'll figure that out eventually.
Okay.
And he'll start writing. So it's a Margaret.
Margaret Deacon.
And her sister's name is?
Helen.
All right.
So look, I'm not totally sure where to start. This is a...
Well, it's all good stories. Start at the beginning. That'll help me out a lot. If you start at the end, we're already done.
What really matters is that my sister Helen, and there's a lot to say about her, but she went missing 6 weeks ago. And it wasn't unusual for her to disappear for a day or two. She's a much wilder child than I am. But she went missing, and she was gone for a couple of weeks. And during that time, we were worried about her. We had no idea what had happened.
While she's talking, not only is Dex going to be nodding and paying attention, but he will occasionally waver from eye contact to check out jewelry and other things that might indicate what he might be charging her for his services.
Okay. So she disappeared, and a month ago, so 4 weeks ago, she just turned up out of nowhere, wandering the streets of downtown. It was late at night. She was dressed in only a blood-stained, dirty negligee, a camisole.
Is that what she was wearing when she went missing?
I don't know what she was wearing when she went missing, but okay. I doubt she was wearing a blood-stained camisole.
All right.
The cops actually picked her up, and they recognized her. They knew that, I'm not sure how to say this, but we're from an influential and wealthy family. You may not know us, but they certainly did, and they recognized her immediately, and they knew that she was the heir to the Deacon fortune, and they brought her home and discreetly left her with my father. She didn't recognize me at all. On her return, she was mumbling a little bit, words that made no sense. She was essentially catatonic. She just didn't seem to know who we were or where she was, and just kind of kept mumbling. And since then, we've had doctors and we've had specialists and the best care that money can buy, and we've made no progress at all. And she's still exactly the same as she was 4 weeks ago.
See, Dex kind of squirmed a little when she said best money could buy. He's ready. He's ready because he's the best money's about to buy.
So I'm not sure what I can tell you, but I have to find out what happened to my sister, and I have to find out if we can make her better.
So while she's talking, as a private eye, as a PI, Dex is very familiar with the tones and the manners that people use when they are not telling the truth. And he's keeping an eye on her to see if she's really being honest with him on what's going on so far.
Okay.
And just as an expose, I want to use the assess honesty.
Perfect. And that's a great way to play that.
Yeah.
So far, everything she said is totally truthful.
So
perhaps not the whole story, but perfectly truthful.
So she's definitely sad about her sister, or at least
I wouldn't say that she's necessarily sad. She's concerned. She wants this solved exactly as she said.
Okay.
She and her sister were, well, I should say, my sister and I, maybe we weren't close as I would have liked, and there's a lot of history there. We weren't best friends by any stretch, but that doesn't mean that I don't want to know what happened to her and I don't want to find who did this to her.
So what kind of people do the deacons work with? Who would have been wanting to take your sister?
Well, I have no idea who would have wanted to take her. But let me tell you a little bit about our family. And again, I don't want to brag, but we're a very well-off family. My father was a real estate mogul. And he made a fortune here over the last decade. And even through the Depression, he did really well when people were struggling.
A little intimidated by the wealthy woman, he makes sure he straightens his tie and that his shirt collar's down properly.
So, unfortunately, things have really changed over the last couple of years for us. It's not that we've lost our money, but my mother died 2 years ago. And everything changed when Mom died. My father had run the business for his entire life. He made all the deals. He knew all the people. And when she passed, he just didn't want anything to do with it anymore. And he handed Deacon Holdings off to us, to Helen and me to run. And so we've been responsible for everything since then. And when I say we, I really mean I, because to be honest, Helen hasn't been that interested in being the responsible businesswoman.
So is she interested in the money but not the business?
She just doesn't have a head for business. She's a lot more interested in maybe what's playing at the movies or dancing down at the club.
What kind of business is Deacon Holdings involved in?
It's real estate speculation and real estate development. So it's and we've done well, but it's hard. It's hard work, and I've been doing a lot of the work. And as a woman running this in town, it's an uphill battle. And to be frank, Dex, I'm tired, and I need help, and I'd like to have my sister back.
I can imagine there's lots of people in town that would want their hands in the cookie jar that you're running.
That's true. We have to be careful about whom we deal with. And
Exactly.
that's part of why I came to you, Mr. Raymond. I mean Dex.
That's fine.
I don't mind saying that when I asked around about you, people told me you were the kind of guy who would see this case through to the end if you took it. And I need to know that that's true, Dex. Will you see this through to the end? All the way?
Never stop short on a case, darling.
Well,
Never come up short.
that's good. That's good. Now, I'm afraid I may have waited too long.
Now, when you say waited too long, you mean you should have come to somebody 4 weeks ago when your sister showed up?
Exactly.
Where is she now?
Well, she's at home. And to be honest, I put more faith in the police than I should have. I thought that they would investigate this and solve this.
Yeah, you put your faith in the wrong place there.
Yeah, I mean, they made a half-hearted investigation, but they didn't really come up with anything. And now I'm just afraid that I'll never get the real story from Helen. And I don't want to curse like a sailor, but I want to get the sons of bitches who did this.
Can you tell me who you were working with the police?
I was working with one of the precinct chiefs. His name was Ted Riley, I think. Riley.
Right.
It was Riley. No, not Ted. It wasn't Ted. It was hang on, that's not right. It was Theo Riley.
Does Dex know Theo Riley? Maybe not.
You might know the name. Not a close friend.
Then Dex will just knowingly nod at her and make the note, and is at, as I am, at the end of that sheet, and he flips it over, smooths it out on the back of the book. So who else has come to see your sister?
Well, it's interesting you should say that.
And by the way, I'm doing, I don't know, one of the things I was curious about is how research ends up working. It probably wouldn't work in this case.
Yeah.
But it's when there's other information that I've got to look up. But anyway, go on.
No, that's exactly right. Here this is mostly conversation with her, and if you ask questions, she's going to answer you.
Okay.
There are certain things she may want to hold back, but if you press her, she's hiring you, so if you feel like you're not getting what you want, you could use a push to try to get more.
Okay. So anyone else?
So we live at the manor. It's my father and me and Helen and a few servants. We have a butler and now a nurse.
That's it. The butler did it. We're done, Kurt. We're all set.
But we're never all there together. Dad is out a lot, and I'm there taking care of Helen. But I can only handle so much. There's really nothing to do. She just sits there and stares at the wall and mumbles.
Yeah, when people get like this, sometimes you call in more than a nurse. Have you had any other doctors in to visit her?
Well, as I said, we've had specialists and we've had physicians and psychiatrists, and they've made no meaningful progress.
Anyone from out of town?
Yeah, we flew in someone from Dallas, and someone came down from San Francisco as well. And
all right.
They say that she's had a psychic shock or a psychic break. They use different words, but really they're saying that something traumatized her so much that, at least for now, her mind is broken.
All right. Well, I'm not sure I can get anything more right now. I've got a few sources I can check in with. In the meantime, maybe you should go relax, have yourself a nice drink, and we could talk about the fees for my services.
Well, I'm happy to talk about that, and as long as you're reasonable, I'm sure the fee will be fine. There are maybe a couple things I should mention to you. You asked who would come to the house, and I kind of balked at that because they haven't really come, but it's hard for me to talk about these things because I'm a fairly proper woman. But Helen was
take a look around you, darling. It's all right to speak your mind here. That's the only way we get things done. I will reassure her of that.
Okay, I appreciate that. And you could use reassurance, and I would, and that would be great. And Helen was a wild child, and she. I'd like to say she had a man on the side, but she had several men on the side. And I have no idea if they were involved in this, but you should know that she was, as far as I know, I hear that she was seeing several men. The only one I know about for sure by name was Marshall Daly. He's a screenwriter at Capitol Pictures, working on the movies. He seems, to the little bit that I know, to be very, very handsome. Perhaps angry.
Those things go often hand in hand, don't
They do. Well, he seems like he might be jealous, and so I'm not blaming him, but I worry a little bit about that connection. And the only other thing that I can think of that maybe...
So has Masha tried to visit us since she's been in this state?
Not that I'm aware of. Not
right.
when I've been there. So, I haven't seen him for like 5 weeks. So I haven't seen him since before Helen left. Dex, as I'm talking to you, I think that might not be right. It's 5 weeks.
Well, you said she was gone 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, 6
Turn
weeks.
back up, and Dex is pulling back on the page. Look at the first one for his
you're
notes.
right. You're right, Dex. As I think it through with you, you're right. I saw him after she left, but before she returned. He came by just one time looking for her, and I said no, she'd been gone, and he looked a little funny about it, and then that's the last time that I saw him.
So he was looking for her when she was already gone.
Right.
All right.
And the problem is I'm not exactly sure how long she was gone, because sometimes she'd go off for 3 or 4 days, and she'd be, out at a casino or off with someone, and we didn't really think too much about it if it was 2 or 3 or 4 days. But when she'd been gone for a week, people started to notice.
All right.
The only other thing I can think, and I don't know if it would be helpful, but she's just muttering all this nonsense all the time, and some of it reminds me, and I don't know how it reminds me because the words aren't the same. But after our mother died, Helen started talking all this nonsense about auras and secret masters and pyramids, and I don't know who dragged her into that nonsense, but I remember her using the phrase several times when we talked about it, the Argent Light. And she hasn't said Argent Light or any of those things since she's been back, but I don't know. For some reason, her mumblies just kind of make me think about that. I have no idea if there's any type of connection.
Yeah, with the influx of all these people looking for stardom, there's a lot of weird stuff going on.
There is a lot of weird stuff in L.A. right now.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of religions and cults and societies, and I hope she wasn't mixed up in any of that, but I don't know. That's why I'm hiring you.
If she was, we'll find out.
Excellent. So, I don't know what else I can tell you. I might take you up on that, just going home and having a drink now.
It's a good idea. And Dex will pitch her, as she put it, a reasonable fee plus what he thinks she can afford on top of it without being greedy. Just short of that. Use his judgment based on what he has observed of her so far. And put the right number on there to match last week's utility bill that he hasn't paid yet.
And so she hears that fee, and she's a businesswoman. So she says, I know what you're doing here, and I'm fine with that fee as long as you do what you say you're going to do. I won't complain about it one time as long as you follow this through to the end.
Not a problem there. I've got to keep both of these lights on.
All right. So
and that horrible fan racket spinning.
Awesome. So Margaret Deacon will walk out of the office. As she gets up, she smooths her skirt as she steps up. She gets off of the couch, kind of looks down behind her. Again, not with disdain, but just kind of with a funny look. And then I
can't believe I just sat on that look. Yeah.
Smooths her skirt down over her stockings, which you imagine are nice thigh high, and walks to the door. And as she opens the door, she looks back. Takes a puff on her cigarette and says, Mr. Raymond, Dex, I'm very, very glad to have you on the case.
Very glad to be on it. Good luck relaxing. I'll get back to you with news as soon as I have it.
Excellent. And on that note, I think this would be a great place to stop for the episode.
I think it would be too. I like this so far. I like that it's so conversational. That's something that I really appreciate in the game.
Awesome. Well, we're going to pick right back up. So if you want to listen to the next hour, tune in next week. And until then, we'll say bye-bye from the shed.
The preceding podcast was brought to you by One Joe Young. You can find us online at adventuresfromtheshed.com.